The Sunday sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sunset Ridge Estate, bathing the fine porcelain and silver cutlery arranged in perfect symmetry on the imported linen tablecloth. Blake Anderson, owner of Anderson Enterprises and one of the most influential men in Los Angeles, sipped his coffee while absent-mindedly scrolling through his phone. His 3 children, Madison 15, Tyler 10, and Ethan 7, ate in silence, accustomed to the tense calm that characterized family mornings. Sometimes fate patiently waits in the small cracks of our perfect lives, ready to shatter everything we believed immovable with the force of a silenced truth. "Who is Isabel?" Catherine's voice cut through the air like a whip. Blake looked up, meeting the reddened eyes of the woman who for 17 years had been the perfect life companion by the standards of their social circle. She held his unlocked mobile phone in her trembling fingers. "Catherine, we can discuss this in private," Blake murmured, aware of his children's terrified gazes. "Private?" Catherine's bitter laugh echoed through the dining room. "Like your conversations with your assistant? Those where you plan your next business trip?" Time seemed to stop when the Chinese porcelain cup Catherine was holding flew through the air, shattering against the wall in an explosion of white fragments and coffee. Ethan stifled a sob while Madison stood up, taking her brother's hands. "Let's go upstairs," said the teenager with maturity beyond her years, casting a disappointed glance at her father before leaving the dining room. 17 years, Blake. 17 years building your image, being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, maintaining this house like a damn museum to impress your partners. Catherine paced back and forth, tears flowing freely down her perfectly made-up face. "And all for you to humiliate me like this." "Catherine, please." "No, it's over," she declared, taking the keys from her purse. "You have 3 children, a business empire, and apparently a mistress. Let's see how you handle all that without me." The door slam that followed reverberated through the mansion with the finality of a sentence. Blake remained motionless, contemplating the fragments of porcelain scattered across the polished floor, a perfect reflection of what remained of his carefully planned life. Upstairs, clinging to the stair railing, 3 pairs of childish eyes had witnessed how their world crumbled in a matter of minutes. The presidential office of Anderson Enterprises occupied the entire top floor of a skyscraper in downtown Los Angeles. From there, Blake could contemplate the city like a chessboard, where every move was calculated with precision. At 42, he had built a commercial empire spanning from technology to real estate, transforming the modest family business into a multinational corporation. "The divorce papers will arrive this afternoon," informed David Reynolds, his lawyer and college friend, as he poured himself a whiskey from the expensive crystal set. "Catherine isn't playing around, Blake. She's hired Martinez." Blake adjusted his tie, an automatic gesture he performed when feeling he was losing control. "How are the markets today?" "Seriously? Your marriage is disintegrating, and you're asking about the stock market." David placed the glass on the desk. "The kids called 3 times this morning. Your assistant told me you didn't want to take the calls." "I don't have time for family drama. The merger with Global Investments is in a critical phase." David observed his friend, the impeccable suit, the perfectly styled hair with some premature gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished air, the erect posture that never betrayed weakness. But his eyes, usually sharp and calculating, seemed lost. "You can't handle a family crisis the same way you handle a hostile takeover, Blake. These are your children." The businessman turned to the windows, turning his back on his friend. "Catherine always took care of them. I provided financial stability. She handled the emotional stuff. It was an unspoken agreement. Well, the agreement is broken, and now you have 3 kids at home who need a father, not a CEO." When David left, Blake remained contemplating the city. The lights were beginning to turn on as the sun set, illuminating a path back home that for the first time in years he feared to travel. That night, arriving at Sunset Ridge, silence greeted him like an unwelcome guest. Rosa, the housekeeper, had prepared dinner, but the children were already in their rooms. "Madison wouldn't eat, sir," Rosa informed, an older woman who had been in the family's service for decades. "And Ethan's been having nightmares since Sunday. Tyler pretends to be strong, but I found him crying in the garden." Blake nodded, unable to formulate an adequate response. His phone vibrated with a message from Isabel, his assistant, reminding him of the video conference with Japanese investors first thing in the morning. He excused himself, locking himself in his study until midnight, listening through the wall to Ethan's muffled sobs without daring to enter to console him. "I need a nanny," Blake announced one morning, 2 weeks later, to the astonished gaze of Sarah, his HR director. "Someone who can live in the house, take care of the children, take them to school, help with homework. All those things." Sarah adjusted her glasses, disconcerted by the unexpected request. "Mr. Anderson, normally that's not the purview of corporate HR. You could contact a specialized agency." "I don't have time for agencies. I want you to select candidates, interview them, and present me with the best. Someone discreet, efficient, with experience in childcare." He paused, looking at his watch. "I want her hired by Friday." In the company hallways, rumors about Blake Anderson's divorce had spread like wildfire. The scandal was just beginning, fueled by high society that had always viewed with suspicion the meteoric rise of a man who, despite his economic success, was still considered an upstart by traditional families. Friday afternoon, Blake returned home early, something unusual that surprised his children, who had grown accustomed to dining without him. "Madison, Tyler, Ethan, come to the living room," he called, trying to soften his authoritative voice. "There's someone I want you to meet." The children appeared with expressions ranging from Madison's hostile indifference to Ethan's cautious curiosity. Next to Blake was a young woman, about 28, with chestnut hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore a sober but not elegant outfit, and her face without makeup conveyed a serenity that contrasted with the family tension. "This is Olivia Carter," Blake introduced. "She'll be your new nanny and will stay with us for a while." "I'm 15, I don't need a nanny," Madison snapped, crossing her arms. Olivia smiled slightly, unfazed by the hostility. "Hello, Madison. Actually, I was thinking you could help me learn the house and your brother's routines. I'll need an ally." The teenager narrowed her eyes, evaluating the newcomer. Tyler stepped forward, always pragmatic. "Do you know how to play soccer? Our mum never played with us." "I'm terrible at playing, but I learn quickly," Olivia replied with honesty. "Would you teach me?" Ethan, the youngest, approached timidly. "Will you stay when Dad goes on his trip next week?" he asked, involuntarily revealing the fear of abandonment that tormented him. The question fell like a bucket of cold water on Blake, who had completely forgotten to mention the trip to his children. "I'll be here as long as you need me," Olivia replied, looking directly at Blake as she said it like a gentle reproach. Blake observed this woman whom Sarah had selected from dozens of candidates. She didn't have the most impressive resume, teaching studies at a public university, experience as a teacher at a neighborhood school, and as a caregiver for children with special needs. Nothing comparable to Catherine's elite education. However, there was something in her direct gaze and in the natural way she addressed the children that made him think that perhaps Sarah had understood better than he what his family needed. That night, while Blake worked in his study, he heard something he hadn't heard in weeks in that house: children's laughter. He peeked quietly into the hallway and saw Olivia sitting on the floor in Ethan's room, helping them build a fort with sheets and pillows. Even Madison, who had sworn not to speak to her, was there, pretending disinterest while holding a flashlight. "There are people who enter our lives as answers to questions we didn't even know we had," thought Blake, surprised by the unexpected peace he felt seeing that scene. Olivia Carter had grown up in a small agricultural community in Central California, 4 hours from Los Angeles. The daughter of rural teachers, she had learned from childhood the value of knowledge but also of wisdom that doesn't come from books. Her childhood was spent among community gardens, town festivals, and a school where the children themselves helped maintain the garden that provided vegetables for the school cafeteria. When she arrived in the big city to study, she discovered a world governed by surnames and influence, where her full scholarship was viewed with disdain by classmates who drove cars that cost more than her parents' house. Still, Olivia maintained the determination that characterized her family: honest work, sincere words, and an open heart, even when life closed doors. Her first week at Sunset Ridge was an exercise in adaptation. She learned that Ethan feared the dark since his mother's departure, that Tyler hid his passion for poetry because his father considered literature a waste of time without return on investment, and that Madison, under her rebellious teenager facade, still collected butterfly specimens as she had when she was little, a hobby she shared with Catherine. She also discovered that Blake Anderson, the feared businessman whose reputation was legendary in the corporate world, didn't know how the washing machine worked, had never prepared breakfast, and was unaware of basic details of his children's school life. One morning, while Olivia was preparing breakfast, Blake entered the kitchen looking for coffee. He stopped, surprised to see his 3 children sitting around the central island, helping to make Spanish omelettes. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," greeted Olivia, without the fearful deference his employees showed. "There's fresh coffee." "What are you doing?" he asked, watching Ethan enthusiastically beat eggs. "Breakfast for Dad," exclaimed the little one. "Olivia says omelettes are magical because they bring families together." Blake took a seat, uncomfortable with this new dynamic. He was used to silent breakfasts, where everyone looked at their phone or tablet. "Madison cut the potatoes," continued Ethan, "and Tyler set the table." Blake noticed that indeed the table was set, not with the formal dinnerware Catherine always demanded, but with colourful plates he didn't remember owning. "They're new," explained Olivia, reading his confusion. "We bought them yesterday. The children chose the colours." "I don't remember authorizing that purchase," Blake automatically responded. Ethan's smile vanished. Tyler looked at the floor. "I paid for them," Olivia intervened with a serene but firm voice, "as a gift for the children. In my family, meals are for conversation and connection, not to impress anyone." Their gazes met for an instant. Hers, challenging but kind. His, surprised by that subtle insubordination. Before Blake could respond, Madison placed the omelette in the center of the table. "It's ready. If you don't like it, you can go to the office as always," said the teenager, with a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. Blake observed the scene, his 3 children looking at him expectantly, the simple omelette instead of the elaborate breakfasts that used to be served, and this woman who in just a week had altered the established order in his home. Against all odds, he took a plate and served himself a portion. "It's been years since I've eaten a Spanish omelette," he commented after the first bite. "My grandmother used to make them on Sundays." Ethan smiled radiantly. Tyler seemed to relax his shoulders, and Madison, although she tried to hide it, sketched a small smile. Olivia observed the scene while pouring orange juice, aware that she had just witnessed a small crack in the wall that Blake Anderson had built around his heart. The clock marked 3 in the morning when Olivia heard the sobs. She got up immediately, following the sound to Ethan's room. The boy was sitting on the bed, hugging his favorite stuffed animal, a grey elephant that had seen better days. "Another nightmare, sweetie," she whispered, sitting next to him. Ethan nodded, tears glistening on his chubby cheeks. "I dreamed that Dad also left and never came back." Olivia hugged him, rocking him gently. "Your dad isn't going anywhere, Ethan. He loves you all very much, but he's always working, and Mom also said she loved us, but she left." Olivia didn't have easy answers. In her 3 weeks at Sunset Ridge, she had learned that Blake Anderson was an absent father, not for lack of love, but due to a profound inability to express his emotions. Catherine, according to the children, had compensated for that coldness by becoming a perfect but distant mother, more concerned with the appearance of an ideal family than with the real emotional needs of her children. "Do you know what we used to do in my town when we couldn't sleep?" she asked, trying to distract the child. "What? We'd prepare milk with honey and tell stories in the kitchen." "Want to try?" They went silently down the stairs to the kitchen, where Olivia turned on just a small light. While she heated the milk, she didn't notice the figure watching them from the hallway. Blake had returned late from a business dinner. Hearing noises in the kitchen, he approached, prepared to confront an intruder. Instead, he found his young son laughing for the first time in weeks, while Olivia acted out with exaggerated gestures a story about a brave elephant who, like Ethan's stuffed animal, protected his family from all storms. Something stirred in Blake's chest, a forgotten feeling. For an instant he wanted to join them, sit in that kitchen illuminated by a single lamp, and listen to simple stories that didn't involve market strategies or stock valuations. But the instinct for self-protection was stronger. He returned to his room, convincing himself he had hired well. Olivia Carter efficiently fulfilled her job of taking care of the children, allowing him to concentrate on what was important, saving his company from the media scandal the divorce was generating. However, that night, for the first time since Catherine's departure, Blake slept deeply. lulled by the distant laughter of his young son. The changes at Sunset Ridge began to accumulate like raindrops that precede the storm. Small at first, fresh flowers on the table, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, the aroma of home cooking replacing the sophisticated menus the chef prepared weekly. One Sunday, Olivia proposed a picnic in the garden. Blake, who usually spent weekends at the office, arrived home to find a blanket spread under the centennial oak and his children running barefoot on the perfectly cut grass. "Dad!" shouted Ethan, running toward him. "Olivia taught us to make kites." Indeed, a colorful artifact rose in the sky, controlled by Tyler, while Madison feigned disinterest but vigilantly watched the trajectory. "Mr. Anderson," greeted Olivia, approaching. "We didn't expect you so early." She wore a simple flowered dress, so different from the formal outfits she wore during the week to take the children to school. Her loose hair swayed with the breeze, and for an instant under the golden light of sunset, Blake thought she seemed to belong to that place, as if the garden had always been incomplete without her. "I cancelled a meeting," he admitted, surprising himself. He couldn't remember the last time he had prioritized anything over work. "There's fresh lemonade," she offered. "And the children prepared empanadas." "Well, they helped prepare them." Blake loosened his tie, a gesture that Olivia already recognized as a sign of his internal struggle between control and surrender. "I'm not dressed for a picnic," he argued weakly. "The grass doesn't have a dress code, Mr. Anderson," she replied with a slightly mocking smile, "although the ants might judge your Italian shoes." Something in her tone, in the way she challenged him without disrespecting him, disarmed Blake. With any other employee, that familiarity would have been grounds for immediate dismissal. With Olivia, he often found himself following her suggestions against his better judgment. That afternoon, the powerful Blake Anderson sat on a blanket on the grass, took off his shoes at Ethan's insistence, and ate empanadas made by childish hands. When Madison brought her old guitar and timidly played a few notes, remembering the lessons she had abandoned years ago, Blake felt a tightness in his throat. "Mum said it was a waste of time," murmured the teenager, interpreting his silence as disapproval. "Your paternal grandmother played the guitar," Blake responded, surprising everyone with that fragment of family history never shared before. "In fact, that's how she met my father, at a serenade." Olivia observed how Madison's eyes lit up at this unexpected connection with her heritage, and how Blake, perceiving his daughter's interest, continued with the story of his parents, revealing parts of himself that seemed to have been buried under years of professional ambition. When the sun began to set, Ethan fell asleep with his head resting on Olivia's lap. Without thinking, she caressed his hair with a maternal gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Blake. "You have a gift with children," he commented, as they picked up the picnic things. "It's not a gift, Mr. Anderson. It's simply being present," she responded, with that frankness that disarmed him. "Children don't need perfection. They need to know they are important to someone." Their gazes met, and for a fleeting but electric instant, both felt a connection that transcended the employer-employee relationship. Olivia was the first to break eye contact, suddenly aware of the invisible line she had just crossed. "I should take Ethan to bed," she murmured, standing up with the child in her arms. Blake nodded, watching her walk away through the garden with his young son nestled against her chest, an image he stored in his memory, like someone treasuring something precious and fragile. "There are encounters that are like seeds," he thought, "planted in arid terrain, patiently waiting for us to learn to water again." The annual gala of Anderson Enterprises was the most important social event on the corporate calendar. In the past, Catherine took care of every detail, from invitations to flowers, creating a dazzling evening that reaffirmed the Andersons' position in the social elite. This year, the event acquired special significance. It was Blake's first public appearance after the official announcement of his divorce, and rumors about his relationship with his assistant had reached scandalous proportions, affecting the confidence of some conservative investors. "I need everything to be impeccable," Blake explained to his PR team. "This gala must demonstrate that Anderson Enterprises continues to be synonymous with excellence and stability, regardless of my personal situation." On the day of the event, Blake arrived home early to prepare. He found Olivia in the living room helping Tyler with a scale model of the solar system for his school project. "Miss Carter, I need to speak with you," he said formally, gesturing for her to follow him to his study. Once there, Blake closed the door and headed to his desk, maintaining the professional distance that lately he found difficult to preserve near Olivia. "Tonight is the annual gala. I'll be coming home very late," he explained. "I've hired a backup nanny so you can rest." Olivia frowned. "It's not necessary, Mr. Anderson. I'm perfectly capable of staying with the children." "I insist." His tone brooked no argument. "Besides, the children will attend the first part of the event. It's a family tradition, and the press expects to see them." "Do the children know?" The question made him uncomfortable. Indeed, he had forgotten to mention it to his children. "I'll let them know during dinner," he responded, adjusting his cufflinks. "I've arranged for the company stylist to come prepare them. Madison has a new dress in her closet, and the boys have tailored suits." Olivia observed him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to read beyond his corporate facade. "With all due respect, Mr. Anderson, have you considered if the children want to attend? Madison has a math exam tomorrow, Tyler is excited about finishing his project, and Ethan hates crowds. They give him anxiety." Blake visibly tensed. "They are my children, Miss Carter. I appreciate your dedication, but there are certain family traditions that must be maintained. Public opinion isn't who hugs Ethan when he has nightmares," interrupted Olivia, with gentleness but firmness. "Nor who sees Madison's face when her mother cancels another phone call because she's too busy in her new life." A silence charged with tension settled between them. Blake contemplated this woman who in just 2 months had achieved what he had failed to do in years, truly knowing his children. "I'll talk to them," he finally conceded. "If they really don't want to attend, I won't force them." Olivia's grateful smile caused an inexplicable warmth in his chest. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson." "Blake," he corrected, surprising himself. "When we're alone, you can call me Blake." To his delight, a slight blush tinged Olivia's cheeks before she nodded and left the study. That night, dressed in an impeccable black suit, Blake gathered his children to discuss the gala. To his surprise, Madison expressed interest in attending. Tyler proposed going just for a while so he could finish his project, and Ethan, after the guarantee that he could stay with Olivia if he felt uncomfortable, agreed to try on the new suit. While the stylist finished the final touches, Blake waited in the lobby. Olivia came down the stairs with Ethan's hand in hers, transformed into a little gentleman with a bow tie. "Someone wanted to show you how handsome he looks," she said, with evident pride. Blake knelt to be at his son's height. "You look very elegant, champ." Ethan smiled timidly. "Olivia says I look like a secret agent." "The best agent I've ever seen," confirmed Blake, winking at him. When he stood up, he found Olivia observing them with an expression he couldn't decipher. She wore her simple work uniform, hair tied back in her usual ponytail, and yet Blake thought he had never seen anyone so authentically beautiful. "You should come." The words escaped his lips before he could contain them. "To the gala, as a guest, not as an employee." Olivia blinked in surprise. "I don't have anything appropriate to wear to an event like that. I can solve that with a call," he offered. "The stylist could—" "No," she interrupted with delicacy. "I appreciate the invitation, but it wouldn't be appropriate." The reality of their different worlds fell upon them with the weight of the inevitable. Blake nodded, understanding what Olivia wasn't saying, that her presence at the gala as his personal guest would generate exactly the kind of rumors he was trying to silence. Of course, it was an impulsive suggestion. The arrival of Madison and Tyler, elegantly dressed, interrupted the moment. Olivia took a step back, recovering her professional role, while Blake contemplated his 3 children with sudden paternal pride. The gala proceeded as planned. Strategic conversations, firm handshakes, calculated smiles. Blake presented his children to partners and investors, observing with surprise how Madison demonstrated a genuine interest in business aspects, while Tyler charmed everyone with his encyclopedic knowledge on diverse topics. However, as the night progressed, Ethan began to show signs of anxiety. He clung to his father's hand, eyes increasingly glassy from the noise and crowds. "I want to go home," he finally whispered. "I want Olivia." Blake looked around, investors attentive to his every move, journalists waiting for the slightest slip to fuel the scandal, partners evaluating his ability to maintain control. And then he looked at his young son with eyes bright with contained tears, trying to be brave for him. The decision was surprisingly easy. "Tyler, Madison, we're going home," he announced, taking Ethan in his arms. Family first. Richard Foster, his main investor, frowned upon seeing him head toward the exit. "Leaving so early, Anderson? You haven't even spoken with the Japanese yet." "My son isn't feeling well," replied Blake with a new serenity. "Negotiations can wait until tomorrow." "Your ex-wife was right," commented Foster with disdain. "You're going soft. First the rumors about your assistant, now this. What's next?" "Converting the company into an NGO." Blake stopped, aware of the curious glances. In the past, he would have prioritized Foster's opinion over any personal need, but something had changed in him. "Richard, my family is not up for negotiation," he responded in a low but firm voice. "And I'd appreciate it if you kept your opinion about my personal life to yourself." Leaving a stunned Foster behind him, Blake left with his 3 children, feeling inexplicably liberated, as if he had left behind an invisible weight he had been carrying for years. Upon arriving home, they found Olivia in the living room reading a book. Her expression of surprise at seeing them return early transformed into concern upon noticing Ethan's state. "Too many people," explained Blake as Olivia took the child in her arms. "I think we've had enough high society for today." While Olivia went upstairs with Ethan to help him change, Madison looked at her father in a new light. "You've never left a gala early," she observed. "Not even when I got appendicitis last year. Mom took me to the hospital while you finished closing a deal." The truth in his daughter's words hit Blake like a slap. He tried to remember who that man had been, capable of prioritizing a contract over his daughter's health, and couldn't reconcile it with who he was now, or perhaps with who he was beginning to be. Later, when the children were asleep, Blake found Olivia in the kitchen preparing herself a tea. "Thank you for bringing them home," she said without looking at him directly, "especially Ethan. It means a lot to him that you put his needs first." "I should have done it before," admitted Blake, loosening his tie, "with all of them." Olivia offered him a cup of tea, a simple gesture that symbolized the new territory they were entering. Not completely personal, but definitely beyond professional. "It's never too late to change, Blake," she murmured, and the sound of his name on her lips produced a pleasant shiver. When their fingers brushed as he took the cup, neither of them immediately withdrew their hand. They stayed like that, in a contact as slight as it was meaningful, while the aroma of herbal tea and the dim light of the kitchen created a moment of perfect intimacy in their imperfect world. Sometimes, thought Blake, the most important lessons come wrapped in the simplest packages, and the truest moments happen when no one else is watching. Spring arrived at Sunset Ridge, bringing with it a rebirth that transcended the seasonal. After 4 months under Olivia's care, the mansion that had once been a perfectly decorated but soulless space began to reflect the personalities of those who inhabited it. The walls of Ethan's room now displayed constellations that glowed in the dark, installed by Blake during an unusual weekend without work. Tyler's room had become a sanctuary of books and scientific models, where Olivia had insisted on creating an invention corner with materials for his projects. And Madison, whose space had always been a reflection of maternal expectations, began to decorate it with her own photographs, band posters, and a corner dedicated to her renewed passion for music. In the garden, a small organic garden thrived under the joint care of Olivia and the children, a project that Blake had initially considered impractical but now visited frequently, surprised by the pride he felt seeing the plants his own children had sown grow. "These strawberries are smaller than the ones from the supermarket," he observed one afternoon, crouching next to Olivia to examine the first red fruits that peeked among the leaves. "But they taste of sun and effort," she replied, picking a tiny strawberry and offering it to him. "Try?" Blake took the strawberry directly from her fingers, an intimate gesture that caused a moment of tension between them. The intense flavor instantly transported him to his childhood, to summers at his grandfather's farm, before his father sold it to invest in his first business. "It's exactly as I remembered," he murmured, surprised by the wave of nostalgia. Olivia smiled, and Blake found himself increasingly addicted to that gesture, to the way her eyes lit up from within. "The memory of taste is the most powerful," she commented, picking another strawberry for Ethan, who was approaching running. "It connects us with who we were." That night during dinner, a new tradition instituted by Olivia where everyone ate together without electronic devices, Tyler casually mentioned the school science fair that was approaching. "My renewable energy project is almost ready," he explained enthusiastically. "Olivia helped me get the miniature solar panels." "I'm sure it will be excellent," replied Blake, feeling a twinge of guilt for not having learned about the project earlier. "The presentation is on Friday," continued Tyler, looking at his plate. "I know you have the shareholders' meeting, but I thought maybe—" The expectant silence that followed weighed on Blake like a silent accusation. He noticed that Olivia was watching him, not with reproach but with a kind of contained hope. "I'll reschedule the meeting," he decided, surprising everyone, including himself. "I wouldn't miss your presentation, Tyler." His middle son's smile was worth every one of the logistical complications this decision would entail. Later, while Olivia and Blake washed the dishes, another new custom they had adopted to the astonishment of the service staff, she broke the complicit silence. "You did the right thing with Tyler. It will mean the world to him to have you there." "I'm learning," admitted Blake. Slowly but learning. They worked in sync, her washing, him drying, a domestic rhythm that was surprisingly satisfying for someone accustomed to directing corporations but not participating in household tasks. "Last week I heard Madison playing the guitar," commented Olivia, passing him a plate. "She has a natural talent. She reminded me of—" She stopped abruptly, as if she had been about to cross an invisible line. "Who?" asked Blake, genuinely curious. Olivia hesitated but finally replied, "My mother. She played in a small folk group. Nothing professional, but she did it with heart." It was the first time Olivia had shared something so personal, and Blake treasured the information like receiving an unexpected gift. "I'd like to hear her someday. Madison, I mean," he added quickly. Catherine always insisted on piano lessons. She considered the guitar, too. "Common. Music doesn't understand social classes, Blake," responded Olivia, using his name with a naturalness that had become habitual between them in private moments. "Only what comes from the soul." The soapy water touched their hands when Olivia passed him the last glass. For an instant their fingers intertwined under the foam, and neither made a move to separate. "Olivia," Blake began, with a voice he didn't recognize as his own, more vulnerable than he ever allowed himself to be. The doorbell interrupted the moment. Rosa, the housekeeper, announced an unexpected visit. "It's Mrs. Catherine, sir," she informed with evident discomfort. "She says she needs to speak with you urgently." The spell was broken. Olivia withdrew her hand, drying it on her apron, while the professional mask returned to her face. "You should attend to her," she said, taking a step back. "I'll check that the children are all right." Blake watched her walk away, taking with her the warmth they had shared moments before. He breathed deeply, preparing to face the woman who had once been the center of his universe, and who now returned as a reminder of the life he had left behind. "There are moments suspended between what could be and what we don't yet dare to name," he thought, as he headed to the reception area. "Fragile instants like soap bubbles that burst before we can catch them." Catherine Wells still looked impressive, with that classic and calculated beauty she had always used as a social weapon. She wore a designer outfit that evidenced her recent weight loss, perfectly styled hair in a modern cut, and discreet but undoubtedly expensive jewelry. "Blake," she greeted with studied coldness. "I'm sorry to appear without warning, but we need to talk." He invited her into the living room, noticing how she scanned every detail, every change in decoration, with a critical eye. She stopped in front of a mural of family photographs that Olivia had helped the children create, where recent images coexisted with some rescued from forgotten albums. "I see you've been redecorating," commented Catherine, in a tone impossible to decipher. "Interesting aesthetic choice." "The children did it," responded Blake, pouring himself a whiskey without offering her one, knowing her aversion to alcohol. "To what do I owe your visit, Catherine?" She took a seat with the elegance of someone who has spent life in high society salons, crossing her legs in a gesture that he once would have found seductive. "I've been reflecting, Blake," she began, her voice acquiring a softer tone. "About us, about the family. Perhaps I was impulsive." Blake raised an eyebrow, surprised by this unexpected turn. "5 months have passed, Catherine, and as I recall, you were quite clear when breaking our Chinese tableware. Pain makes us commit mistakes," she admitted, with a vulnerability so unusual that Blake didn't know if it was genuine or calculated. "I've been in therapy. I've realized that our family deserves a second chance. Before Blake could respond, the sound of footsteps on the stairs caught his attention. Madison had stopped at the threshold, pale and tense upon seeing her mother. "Mum," she whispered, with a mixture of longing and wariness. "I didn't know you were coming." Catherine stood up, opening her arms. "Madison, darling, look at you. You've grown so much." The teenager hesitated, but finally advanced for a brief and formal hug, so different from the spontaneous warmth she now shared with Olivia. "Are you going to stay?" asked Madison with a childish hope that broke Blake's heart. "We're talking about that, dear," responded Catherine, caressing her daughter's hair with a possessive gesture. "Where are your brothers?" "Tyler is finishing a project, and Ethan is already asleep," replied Blake, perceiving the growing tension. "Madison, it's late. You should go up to rest." The young woman looked between her parents, clearly confused by the situation but sensing its gravity. "Can I see Mom tomorrow?" she asked cautiously. "Of course, darling," responded Catherine, kissing her forehead. "We have a lot to talk about. Your look has changed. We could go shopping, like before." Once Madison withdrew, Catherine sat back down, this time leaning toward Blake with intensity. "I've made mistakes, Blake. I miss you. I miss the children. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but we can rebuild it for them." Blake observed her, searching within himself for the longing or pain he should feel at these words that months ago he would have been desperate to hear. Instead, he found a strange calm, as if he were contemplating a familiar painting, but from the distance of someone who no longer recognizes himself in the image. "Why now, Catherine?" he finally asked. "Months have passed." She momentarily averted her gaze, an almost imperceptible gesture that Blake, after years of business negotiations, recognized as a sign that she wasn't being completely honest. "I read about the merger with Asia Pacific Group," she finally admitted. "I know what that means for Anderson Enterprises, and I thought that maybe you'd need family stability in front of the media. Present a united image." The truth emerged, cold and calculating as their marriage had always been. A strategic alliance disguised as love, a perfect facade for the outside world, while their hearts remained isolated in separate rooms of the same house. "Always so practical, Catherine," commented Blake without rancor, but with renewed clarity. "The divorce will be signed next week." "I see no reason to delay the inevitable." Catherine's face hardened, the mask of vulnerability vanishing at the rejection. "It's because of her, isn't it?" she asked with disdain. "Your nanny. Jennifer Porter told me she saw you with her and the children in the park, playing happy family." Blake tensed at hearing the name of Catherine's best friend, known for her malicious comments and her network of contacts in high society. "Olivia is an exceptional employee who has brought stability to our children while you were finding yourself in spiritual retreats," he responded with more harshness than he intended. Catherine stood up, picking up her designer bag with an abrupt movement. "You always had a particular taste for the simple, Blake. First your assistant, now this small-town woman who surely sees in you a ticket to a better life. Don't speak of what you don't understand," he warned, keeping his voice low, but with an intensity that surprised them both. Catherine studied him with narrowed eyes, perceiving something that confirmed her suspicions. "My God, you're in love with her," she declared, between incredulous and furious. "Do you have any idea how that will look? The great Blake Anderson falling for a servant after a scandalous divorce." The accusation floated in the air like a truth that Blake had not yet dared to name, even to himself. In love? Was that what he felt when Olivia smiled, when their hands accidentally brushed, when he secretly observed her interact with his children with a naturalness he himself had never achieved? "Good night, Catherine," he finally said, accompanying her to the door. "You can see the children tomorrow if you wish, but our conversation is over. This won't end like this, Blake," she warned from the threshold. "We have a prenuptial agreement, but you know I can make this divorce a media hell. What will your conservative investors think when they know you replaced your high society wife with the nanny?" The threat was suspended in the air when Blake closed the door, leaning against it as he tried to process what had just happened. It wasn't Catherine's threat that disturbed him, but the revelation it had brought with it. His feelings for Olivia, crudely exposed by the person who best knew his weaknesses. Upon turning, he found Olivia standing in the hallway, with an expression that indicated she had heard at least part of the conversation. The silence between them, weighed with unspoken words, unformulated questions, unnamed feelings. "The children are fine," she finally informed with a controlled voice. "Madison has many questions, but I told her she would talk with you in the morning." The return to formal treatment was like a wall rising between them. "Thank you, Olivia," responded Blake, wishing to say much more but not finding the appropriate words. She nodded and turned to go up the stairs. Blake watched her walk away, aware that Catherine had altered the delicate balance they had built in recent months. "There are truths that, once pronounced, change the air we breathe," he thought, as he poured himself another whiskey in the solitude of the living room. "And there are feelings that, once recognized, can no longer be hidden in the shadows of what we pretend not to see." Catherine's visit triggered a series of events that shook the fragile harmony of Sunset Ridge. As she had promised, she returned the next day, bringing extravagant gifts for the children and calculated smiles. During the following weeks, her presence became constant. She appeared at school events, organized shopping trips with Madison, and showed up at the house without prior notice, always elegant, always observing with a critical eye the new family dynamics. Olivia maintained a professional distance, limiting herself to necessary interactions with Blake. The moments of complicity, the nighttime conversations over tea and shared confidences, had vanished as if they had never existed. One afternoon, while Olivia helped Ethan with his homework in the garden, Catherine unexpectedly appeared, accompanied by Jennifer Porter, her inseparable friend and main source of gossip in high society. "Ethan, sweetie," called Catherine, deliberately ignoring Olivia. "Mom has brought you something special." The child looked at Olivia as if seeking permission before running to his mother. This small gesture didn't go unnoticed by Catherine, whose smile imperceptibly tensed. "Mrs. Anderson, we weren't expecting you today," greeted Olivia with professionalism. "Ethan must finish his math exercises before playing." Jennifer studied Olivia with the thoroughness of an entomologist examining a particularly interesting insect. "So, you are the famous Miss Carter," she commented, her tone falsely kind. "Catherine has told me so much about you." "I hope good things," responded Olivia, with a polite but firm smile. "Oh, of course." Jennifer exchanged a complicit look with Catherine. "We've all been impressed by how a young woman so simple has managed to handle a house of this level. It must be overwhelming for someone of your origin." Olivia maintained her composure, accustomed to this type of veiled attacks after years working for wealthy families. "My origin taught me values I consider fundamental for educating children, Mrs. Porter. Humility and respect, for example." Catherine intervened before Jennifer could respond. "Ethan, go find your siblings. Mom will take you all for ice cream." "But my math," began Ethan, looking at Olivia. "Math can wait," declared Catherine with firmness. "Family comes first, right?" The irony of using precisely that phrase, which had become the new family motto under Olivia's influence, didn't go unnoticed. When Ethan walked away, Catherine turned to Olivia with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I appreciate your dedication, Miss Carter, but now that I am more present, many of your functions will be unnecessary." Olivia held her gaze. "My only interest is the children's well-being, Mrs. Anderson. I am at your service as long as Mr. Anderson considers my presence useful." "Precisely about that I wanted to talk," continued Catherine, lowering her voice. "I've noticed certain familiarity between you and my husband." "Ex-husband," corrected Olivia instinctively, to then regret it upon seeing the triumphant gleam in Catherine's eyes. "The divorce isn't yet official," replied Catherine, "and I have reasons to believe it might not be." Before Olivia could respond, Blake's arrival interrupted the tense conversation. He wore casual clothes, an increasingly frequent image on weekends, so different from the impeccable suit-wearing executive she had initially met. "Catherine, Jennifer," he greeted with professional coldness. "I didn't know you were coming today." "We wanted to surprise the children," explained Catherine, approaching to kiss his cheek, a territorial gesture that didn't go unnoticed by anyone. "Family first, remember?" Blake subtly stepped back, creating distance. "Olivia, could I speak with you for a moment?" he requested, maintaining the formal tone in front of the visitors. As they walked toward the house, Blake murmured, "I'm sorry about this. I didn't know she would come." "Don't worry, Mr. Anderson," responded Olivia, maintaining the professional distance she had imposed on herself since the night of Catherine's visit. "It's understandable that the lady wants time with her children." "Olivia." Blake stopped her, making sure they were out of Catherine's earshot. "About what you heard that night." "No explanation is necessary," she interrupted gently. "Your personal life doesn't concern me. I'm here for the children." The invisible barrier between them seemed insurmountable, built with bricks of social conventions, professional expectations, and unexpressed fears. That night, after Catherine took the children out to dinner, Blake found Olivia in the kitchen, preparing her things to leave. "You're leaving?" he asked, alarmed. "I asked for the night off since the children won't be here," she explained. "I'm going to visit a friend." Blake nodded, experiencing an inexplicable sensation of loss. "Olivia, I want you to know that whatever happens with Catherine, your position here is secure." She looked at him directly for the first time in weeks, and Blake felt the impact of those sincere eyes that saw through his defenses. "Is that what worries you? That I fear for my job?" "No, Mr. Anderson," interrupted Olivia with gentleness but firmness. "Blake, what worries me is not my employment, but this family. The children are confused. They believe their parents might reconcile, especially after your wife's insinuations. And you—" "What?" he asked, almost fearing the answer. "You seem to have forgotten who you want to be," she responded, with a wisdom that transcended her youth. "The man I met months ago made decisions based on appearances and others' opinions. The man I've seen emerge these last months makes decisions from the heart. Don't let fear return you to who you were before." Her words resonated in Blake like a truth he had been avoiding. He had transformed, yes, but still feared the consequences of that transformation, the judgment of the world to which he had always belonged. "It's not that simple, Olivia," he murmured, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "There are considerations. Catherine has threatened to make public—" "Your relationship with me," completed Olivia with a sad smile. "A relationship that doesn't exist, Mr. Anderson. I'm your employee, nothing more." "You know that's not true," responded Blake, taking a step toward her, unable to continue denying what had grown between them. "What I know," responded Olivia, slightly stepping back, "is that you must decide what kind of man you want to be, what example you want to set for your children. And I must remember my place." With these words, Olivia took her bag and headed to the door. Before leaving, she added, "By the way, Tyler's project presentation is on Tuesday. You promised you would be there." When the door closed behind her, Blake was left alone with turbulent thoughts and a growing clarity about the crossroads where he found himself. It wasn't just about choosing between Catherine and Olivia, between the past and a possible future. It was about choosing who he wanted to be, about definitively dropping the mask he had worn for decades. "The masks we wear for protection," he reflected, "end up suffocating the best of ourselves. And when they finally fall, we discover that the face underneath has forgotten how to breathe freely." Tyler's school project turned out to be much more than a simple model. The boy had designed a solar energy collection system that powered a miniature of Sunset Ridge, including lights that turned on at nightfall and a small circuit that pumped water for the miniature garden. "It all started when Olivia showed me how plants convert sunlight into energy," explained Tyler to the science fair judges, with a confidence that Blake had never seen in his middle son. "I thought, if plants can do it, we should learn from them," Blake observed from the first row. His chest swelled with pride so intense it was almost painful. Next to him, Olivia maintained a professional distance, but her smile seeing Tyler shine was impossible to contain. "You made this possible," murmured Blake, leaning slightly toward her. "I barely knew he was interested in science." "He was always interested," responded Olivia in a low voice. "He just needed someone to listen to his ideas without judging them first." 2 rows behind, Catherine observed the scene with an impassive expression. She had arrived late, just as Tyler began his presentation, dressed as if attending a social event rather than a children's school fair. Her entrance had caused a small stir, momentarily distracting Tyler, who had sought Olivia's reassuring gaze before continuing. When Tyler received first prize, the tears of pride in Blake's eyes revealed the father, who had always existed beneath the businessman's shell. It was he who went up first to hug his son, lifting him in his arms as he hadn't done since he was a small child. "I'm so proud of you," he told him, his voice broken with emotion. "So incredibly proud." The celebration continued that afternoon at Sunset Ridge, with a small party organized by Olivia, where Tyler was the center of attention. Catherine had excused herself after the award ceremony, citing prior commitments, but not before giving Tyler an ostentatious gift that the boy had thanked politely, but without the enthusiasm he showed for the simple homemade cake Olivia had prepared with his favorite flavor. While the children played in the garden, Blake found Olivia in the kitchen, storing the remains of the celebration. "You should have hired a catering service," he commented, trying awkwardly to help wrap the leftover cake. "Tyler preferred this," responded Olivia, rescuing the battered cling film from his inexpert hands. "He said parties with waiters make him feel like he's at a company event instead of at home." Blake paused, absorbing the simple but profound wisdom of his son. "I never knew what they really thought," he admitted. "I always assumed they wanted what I considered best. The best school, the best toys, the best parties." "Children don't want the best," responded Olivia softly. "They want to feel seen, heard, important to their parents. Everything else is secondary." Their gazes met, and for an instant the professional barrier that Olivia had maintained in recent weeks seemed to dissolve. Blake took a step toward her, unable to resist the gravitational force that attracted him to this woman who had revolutionized his world. The doorbell interrupted the moment. Rosa announced the arrival of David Reynolds, Blake's lawyer and friend, with a worried expression. "He says it's urgent, sir." David entered like a storm, with a newspaper in hand and a grave expression. "We have a problem," he announced, spreading the newspaper on the kitchen table. In the society section, a sensationalist headline announced, "Blake Anderson's secret romance. Is the nanny the reason for the millionaire divorce?" Under the headline, a series of photographs showed Blake, Olivia, and the children in the park at the school fair, and even an image taken with a telephoto lens of both of them in the kitchen, laughing while washing dishes. "This is just the beginning," continued David. "I've received calls from 3 journalists seeking confirmation. Someone has leaked internal information about the family dynamic." Blake paled, instantly understanding the source of the leak. "Catherine," he murmured, rage and disbelief mixing in his voice. "She's using the children as pawns." Olivia contemplated the photographs with a horrified expression. Her image, her privacy exposed for public consumption, transformed into a scandal to sell newspapers. "I'm sorry," she murmured, stepping back. I should go." "Olivia, no." Blake tried to stop her, but she was already heading toward the door. "The children can't see me like this," she explained, with contained tears. "I need time to process this." David contemplated the scene with a compassionate expression. "Blake, this will affect the merger with Asia Pacific. I've already received an email from Tanaka expressing concern about the CEO's personal stability. You know how conservative the Japanese are regarding these issues." The news was like a punch to the stomach. The merger represented the culmination of years of work, the expansion that would secure the future of Anderson Enterprises for generations. "What does the legal department suggest?" he asked, automatically recovering his executive tone, like armor he put on to protect himself. "Immediate public distance," responded David without beating around the bush. "Issue a statement denying any inappropriate relationship. Perhaps consider temporary leave for Miss Carter until the media storm passes." The words hung in the air, loaded with implications. Olivia, who still hadn't left, stopped at the door, her back rigid as she listened to her future being discussed like a corporate strategy. "I understand," she finally said, turning to face them with dignity despite the tears that threatened to spill. "I'll prepare my things." "Olivia, wait." Blake was torn between his instinct to protect his family and the business pressure that had guided all his decisions for decades. "We can handle this another way." "No, Mr. Anderson," she responded, resuming formality as a protective shield. "Your lawyer is right. The children don't deserve to be wrapped up in a scandal. And your company. It's too important." With these words, she left the kitchen, leaving Blake divided between 2 worlds that seemed impossible to reconcile. That night, after a painful explanation to the children about Olivia's temporary absence, which provoked disconsolate tears from Ethan and a look of deep disappointment from Madison, Blake locked himself in his study with a bottle of whiskey as his only company. The phone rang close to midnight. It was Catherine. "I hope you've seen the newspaper." Her voice sounded almost jubilant. "It's just a sample of what can happen if you insist on this divorce, Blake. Imagine what your children will think when they grow up and discover that their father sacrificed family stability for an affair with the help. You're despicable, he responded, with a calmness that masked his fury. Using our children as weapons, leaking family photos to the press. How far are you willing to go? As far as necessary, responded Catherine, abandoning all pretense. Come home, Blake. Let's reconcile publicly. Save your precious corporate empire and my social position. It's a beneficial deal for both, as our marriage always was. The truth of her words, the raw reality of what their union had been, hit Blake like a late revelation. Their marriage had never been about love, but about mutual convenience. He obtained the perfect wife for his corporate image, she the status and wealth she craved. The children are happier now, he finally said, surprising himself. Despite the divorce, despite everything, they are happier in this imperfect house than in the museum of appearances that you built. They're children, Blake, responded Catherine with disdain. They don't know what's best for them. And you, do you really believe that woman wants you for who you are? It's evident she sees in you a ticket to a life she could never achieve on her own. Catherine's words, although calculated to hurt, provoked the opposite effect, a sudden clarity about his own feelings, about what he truly valued. You're wrong, Catherine, he responded with serene conviction. Olivia Carter has shown me more about the real value of life in 6 months than you in 17 years of marriage. And if there's someone who loved me for the wrong reasons, it was never her. He hung up the phone, cutting off the string of threats his ex-wife was beginning to utter. For the first time in what seemed an eternity, Blake Anderson felt he saw with absolute clarity the path he should take. The problem was that perhaps it was already too late. Sometimes the most devastating storms are not those that arrive without warning, he thought, contemplating the photograph of his children resting on his desk, but those we ourselves feed with our fear of the truth. The following days passed in a haze of frantic activity. Blake found himself simultaneously navigating the media crisis, tense negotiations with Japanese investors, and his children's incessant questions about Olivia's return. But she promised to help me with my history presentation, insisted Ethan, with eyes reddened from contained tears. She said she'd never break a promise. Olivia didn't break her promise, sweetheart, Blake tried to explain, looking for words that a 7-year-old could understand. Sometimes adults need time to resolve complications. Complications like the photos in the newspaper, asked Tyler, always perceptive. Madison says Mom is behind all that. The mention of Catherine made Blake tense. Since the article's publication, she had redoubled her appearances at the house, presenting herself as the concerned mother who returned to stabilize a family in crisis. The children, especially Ethan, received her with a mixture of longing and wariness, confused by the situation. Madison, however, maintained a cold distance from her mother. The teenager had developed an intuitive understanding of family dynamics, and one afternoon, while Blake worked in his study, she presented herself with adult determination in her youthful gaze. You sent her away because you're ashamed of her, she accused without preamble, because she doesn't fit into your world of businessmen and rich people. Blake looked up from his documents, surprised by the harshness in his oldest daughter's voice. It's not that simple, Madison. It never is with you, Dad, she responded, crossing her arms. But I saw how you looked at her, how you smiled when she was near. For the first time, you seemed happy, and now you've gone back to being the same robot as always. Her words were like precise darts that hit directly at the center of his internal conflict. There are considerations you don't understand, he tried to explain. The company, our family's financial future. I don't care about the damn company, Madison burst out with tears of frustration. Do you think any of us care? We want a father, not a CEO. Olivia understood that. That's why we love her. That's why you love her too, even though you're too cowardly to admit it. Before Blake could respond, Madison left the study, leaving him with the impact of a truth pronounced without filters or pretensions. That night, unable to concentrate on work, Blake drove aimlessly around the city. Without consciously planning it, he found himself parking in front of the modest apartment building where he knew Olivia lived. David had managed a generous severance package and a letter of recommendation, the impersonal gestures with which corporations compensate the human wounds they cause. He remained in the car, contemplating the illuminated windows, wondering which would be hers. imagining her resuming her normal life, perhaps preparing for another job interview, perhaps relieved to have escaped the drama surrounding the Andersons. The idea that she might be better off without them, without him, caused him physical pain that surprised him with its intensity. His phone vibrated with a message from David. "Tanaka has agreed to continue with the negotiations. Wants to see you tomorrow. Seems the storm is abating." The professional relief he should have felt was overshadowed by the personal emptiness he experienced. The merger, which had been his obsession for years, now seemed a hollow trophy compared to what he had lost. Upon returning to Sunset Ridge, he found Rosa waiting for him with a worried expression. "Little Ethan has a fever, sir," informed the elderly housekeeper. "He wouldn't eat dinner and constantly asks for Miss Olivia." Blake rushed upstairs to his youngest son's room. Ethan lay in bed with flushed cheeks and hair damp against his forehead. Next to him, Madison applied cold compresses, as she had seen Olivia do on previous occasions. "It won't go below 101.3, informed Madison, with adult concern. "I already gave him the medicine, but he keeps asking for Olivia." "Dad," murmured Ethan, upon seeing him, with a weak voice, "I want Olivia. She knows the songs that chase away the fever." Blake sat next to his son, stroking his hair with tenderness. "Olivia can't come right now, champ," he explained gently. "But I'm here, and Madison too. We'll take care of you together." Ethan looked at him with eyes glassy from fever. "But you're always busy," he responded with the brutal honesty of children. "And you don't know the songs." Olivia said they're magic songs from her town. The impotence Blake felt at that moment crystallized all his doubts into a painful certainty. He had committed a monumental error in allowing appearances and external expectations to dictate his decisions. He had sacrificed his family's real happiness on the altar of a respectability that he now understood lacked substance. He spent the night awake next to Ethan, taking turns with Madison to apply compresses and administer medicine. When the fever finally broke toward dawn, he made a decision. He called David first thing. "Cancel the meeting with Tanaka," he instructed, with a serenity that surprised his friend. "In fact, cancel all my meetings today." "Are you crazy?" David's voice reflected disbelief. "We've worked months to reach this point." "The merger depends on this meeting. There's something more important I must resolve first," responded Blake, looking at his sleeping children, exhausted after the night of vigil. "If Tanaka really wants this merger, he'll wait one more day." After hanging up, he gently woke Madison. "I need you to watch your brothers for a few hours," he asked her. "There's something I must do." The teenager looked at him through eyes narrowed from sleep, but suddenly alert. "Are you going to find her?" she asked, and a small smile appeared on her tired face when Blake nodded. "About time, Dad." The journey to Olivia's apartment seemed endless. Blake mentally rehearsed what he would say, how he would explain his cowardice, his indecision, his fear of losing a status he now saw as a golden prison. But all the planned words evaporated when the door opened, and Olivia appeared before him, with an expression of absolute surprise. "Mr. Anderson," she greeted, quickly recovering and adopting the formal tone that now felt like a stab. "Is something wrong with the children?" "Ethan had a fever last night," he responded, noticing how she paled with concern. "He's better now, but he needed you. We all need you." Olivia remained in the threshold without inviting him in, a physical barrier that symbolized the emotional distance he himself had created. "I'm glad Ethan is better," she finally said. "But I don't think it's appropriate for you to be here, Mr. Anderson. Your situation is already complicated enough without adding more speculation." "To hell with speculation," responded Blake, with a passion that surprised them both. "I've lived my entire life worried about what others think, about maintaining appearances, about building a perfect image. And for what? To end up with a house empty of affection and children who barely knew me." Olivia observed him in silence, but something in her expression had softened. "Until you arrived," continued Blake, taking a step toward her, "and showed us what it really means to be a family. You taught us to laugh together, to share, to truly listen to each other. You taught me to be the father my children deserve, the man I always wanted to be but feared to show." "Blake," she began, but he gently interrupted her. "I committed an unforgivable mistake in letting you go, in prioritizing appearances over what truly matters. But if you give me another chance, I promise I will never again allow fear or others' expectations to dictate my decisions. Because I love you, Olivia Carter. I love you with a certainty I've never felt in my life." The words hung suspended between them, a truth finally liberated, stripped of pretensions and calculations. Olivia looked at him with a mixture of emotion and wariness, like someone who fears believing in something too beautiful to be real. "Your children need me," she finally said with a trembling voice. "I understand that, but your world is so different from mine. Are you really willing to face what us would mean?" Blake took her hands in his, a contact he had yearned for during weeks. "My world was a desert disguised as an oasis before meeting you," he responded with absolute sincerity. "And I'm willing to face whatever necessary if that means having you in our lives." In my life, for the first time since their separation, Olivia smiled, a genuine smile that illuminated her face and reached her eyes, those eyes that had seen Blake when no one else truly did. Truth has a price, thought Blake as Olivia finally invited him in, but the cost of denying it is infinitely greater. It's losing ourselves in the process. Olivia's return to Sunset Ridge was received with overflowing joy by the children. Ethan practically jumped into her arms, completely forgetting the fever that had afflicted him. Tyler, always more contained, received her with a firm hug and a smile that expressed everything he didn't say with words. And Madison, to everyone's surprise, broke her facade of indifferent teenager to hug her with tears in her eyes. "I knew Dad would find you," said the young woman, with wisdom beyond her 15 years. "He just needed a push." The happiness of the reunion, however, was soon overshadowed by the consequences of Blake's decision. The absence at the meeting with Tanaka triggered a chain reaction. The Japanese investors, interpreting the absence as a lack of commitment, announced they would reconsider the merger. David arrived that same afternoon with even worse news. "The board of directors has convened an emergency meeting," he informed, nervously pacing around Blake's study. "Foster and his group are questioning your leadership. They talk about emotional instability and impulsive decisions." Blake listened with strange calmness, as if the corporate storm that approached happened in another dimension, to another person. "Let them talk," he finally responded. "I've built this company from scratch. I've taken it further than my father ever dreamed. If they want to question me for prioritizing my family for once in my life, let them do it." David looked at him with a mixture of admiration and concern. "I've known you since college, Blake. I've never seen you like this." He made a significant pause. "I guess love suits you well. But have you considered the practical consequences? If you lose control of the company—" "I'll still be one of the main shareholders," interrupted Blake, "and I have enough personal capital to live comfortably for several lifetimes. What I don't have is infinite time to watch my children grow, to build the life I truly desire." The conversation was interrupted by Rosa's arrival, who announced another unexpected visit. Catherine, accompanied again by Jennifer Porter. "I don't want to see her," began Blake, but David stopped him with a gesture. "You should listen to what she has to say," advised his friend. "For legal strategy, if nothing else." Catherine entered like a contained storm, elegantly dressed but with evident signs of tension. Her eyes narrowed upon seeing Olivia sitting in the garden with the children, visible through the study window. "I see you've made your decision," she commented with calculated coldness, completely ignoring legal advice and common sense. "Why have you come, Catherine?" asked Blake, remaining firm. "If it's to threaten with more scandals, save the effort. It won't work this time." Jennifer Porter stepped forward, her usual expression of superiority replaced by poorly disguised nervousness. "Actually, we come to negotiate," she explained. "The situation has evolved." Blake raised an eyebrow, intrigued by this unexpected turn. "I'm listening." Catherine sat without being invited, placing her designer bag on the desk as if marking territory. "Anderson Enterprises shares fell 4% this morning after the reconsideration of the merger with the Japanese was announced," she began, with the analytical tone that Blake remembered from their discussions on social strategy. "If the board votes against you tomorrow, analysts project an additional fall of 12%. "Since when are you so interested in financial markets, Catherine?" asked Blake, genuinely curious. "Since 30% of my divorce agreement is linked to the value of your shares," she responded straightforwardly. "If the company sinks due to your romantic distraction, we both lose. The truth emerged with brutal clarity. It wasn't moral scandal that concerned Catherine, but the economic consequences for herself. "What exactly are you proposing?" intervened David, always the pragmatist. Catherine exchanged a look with Jennifer before responding, "A public and respectful co-parenting agreement. No personal attacks, no leaks to the press." She made a calculated pause. "In exchange for a revision of the economic agreement, I want shares, not just money." The audacity of the proposal almost drew a laugh from Blake. After trying to destroy his reputation and using his children as pawns, Catherine now sought to benefit from a friendly negotiation. "And what about Olivia?" asked Blake. "Will you stop trying to turn her into the villain of this story?" Catherine studied her perfect nails, avoiding his gaze. "Your personal relationship is your business. As long as it's handled with discretion and the children aren't negatively affected." "The children adore her," interrupted Blake. "Probably more than they love us right now, and with good reason." A flash of genuine pain crossed Catherine's face, a crack in her perfect facade that revealed for an instant the vulnerable woman beneath the social mask. "I was never the mother they needed," she admitted in an almost inaudible whisper. "I don't know how to be." The confession, as unexpected as sincere, disarmed Blake. For the first time since their separation, he saw the woman with whom he had shared 17 years, not as an adversary, but as someone as trapped as he had been in expectations and appearances. "The children will always be your children, Catherine," he responded with a gentleness that surprised all present, "and they have space in their hearts for all of us, if we stop using them as weapons." The conversation that followed was surprisingly civilized. David took notes for a new legal agreement, while Catherine gradually abandoned her defensive posture. When she finally left, something had subtly changed between them. They weren't friends, probably never would be, but they had found common ground in the well-being of their children. That night, while the children slept, Blake and Olivia sat on the back porch, contemplating the garden illuminated by the moon. The silence between them was comfortable, full of possibilities and decisions to make. "Tomorrow I'll face the board of directors," commented Blake, finally. "I might lose control of the company I built." Olivia took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his in a gesture of silent support. "Are you scared?" she asked softly. "Curiously, no," he responded, surprised by his own serenity. "For the first time in decades, I feel I'm making decisions for the right reasons, not out of fear or to meet others' expectations." Olivia rested her head on his shoulder, and Blake felt a peace that no business success had ever provided him. "The children want to know if you'll stay," he murmured after a moment. "If we'll be a family." The word floated between them, loaded with meaning and promises. "And you?" she asked, raising her gaze to meet his. "What do you want, Blake Anderson?" In her eyes, Blake saw reflected not the powerful businessman, but the man he had rediscovered thanks to her. A father, a human being capable of loving without calculations or strategies. "I want to wake up every morning knowing that what truly matters is under the same roof," he responded with absolute sincerity. "I want to build a life where my children's laughter is more valuable than any contract, where your smile is the greatest achievement of my day. I want to love you, Olivia Carter, with the freedom of someone who has finally found himself." Her response didn't come in words, but in a kiss that sealed a promise more powerful than any legal contract, the promise of a future built on foundations of authenticity and true love. "The echoes of our decisions reverberate far beyond what we can foresee," reflected Blake, as he held Olivia in his arms. "But it's the unexpected consequences that often lead us exactly where we needed to be." The boardroom of Anderson Enterprises, located on the 42nd floor of the corporate skyscraper, had always been the stage for Blake's major decisions. With its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, the huge polished oak table, and the 20 Italian leather chairs, the space was designed to impress and intimidate. This morning, however, Blake saw it with new eyes. No longer as the sanctum sanctorum of his power, but simply as a room where people made decisions that affected other people. Nothing more, nothing less. "The board is complete, Mr. Anderson," announced his secretary with evident nervousness. "Mr. Foster has requested to preside over the session, given the circumstances." Blake nodded, thanking her with a smile that seemed to disconcert the woman, accustomed to his usual serious expression on board days. Before entering, he looked at his phone one last time. A message from Olivia with a photo of the children holding a handmade sign that said, "Brave Dad." This simple gesture provided him more strength than all the corporate strategies he had planned. The atmosphere in the room was tense. The 12 members of the board of directors, mostly men older than him, observed him with expressions ranging from disappointment to frank hostility. Richard Foster, his erstwhile ally and now main opponent, occupied the head of the table that traditionally belonged to Blake. "Blake, take a seat," indicated Foster with false cordiality. "We have much to discuss today." During the following hour, Blake patiently listened as his supposed faults were detailed: the cancellation of the meeting with Tanaka, the personal distractions that had generated negative publicity, the drop in the value of the shares. The terms irresponsibility and questionable commitment were frequently repeated. Finally, Foster arrived at the central point. "Therefore, we propose that Blake Anderson take a temporary leave as CEO while the situation stabilizes. I would assume the position on an interim basis with the support of the executive committee until—" "No," interrupted Blake with a calm but firm voice that silenced the room. "I will not accept a temporary leave or any other measure that implies distancing myself from the company I built." Foster frowned, visibly irritated by the interruption. "Blake, I don't think you understand the position you're in. The majority of the board is concerned about your recent stability, and the Japanese have clearly expressed their reservations about continuing negotiations under your leadership." "I perfectly understand my position, Richard," responded Blake, standing to symbolically recover control of the meeting. "And I also understand yours. You've waited for years for the opportunity to take control, manipulating the board with the specter of my personal scandals, while secretly contacting our competitors." A murmur ran through the room as Blake extracted a folder from his briefcase. "I have here emails between you and Global Ventures, our main competitor, discussing a potential position as CEO if you manage to destabilize the merger with the Japanese," he continued, distributing copies among the stunned members of the board. "Curious that you're so concerned about my personal ethics when yours professionally is questionable, to say the least." Foster's face went from red to white in a matter of seconds. "How did you obtain that?" "It's illegal. Corporate espionage. Actually, it was Global Ventures who contacted us," clarified Blake calmly. "It seems they value loyalty more than you, Richard. Their CEO thought I should know who was trying to sabotage our company from within." The revelation caused an immediate change in the meeting dynamics. The board members, previously united against Blake, now looked at Foster with growing suspicion. Corporate betrayal was, for them, a much more serious sin than any personal scandal. "But that's not all I wanted to share today," continued Blake, now with total control of the room. "In the last 24 hours, I've had conversations with Tanaka. Contrary to rumors, the Japanese haven't abandoned the table. In fact, they're impressed by my decision to prioritize a family emergency over a business meeting. Apparently, in Japan, they value leaders who demonstrate humanity, not just ambition." As Blake spoke, the expression of the board members gradually changed from skepticism to respectful attention. He explained to them his renewed vision for the company, maintaining the excellence and ambition that had led them to success, but incorporating human values that would create a healthier and more productive work environment. "In recent months, I've learned that true leadership doesn't consist of sacrificing personal life for professional success, but in integrating both in a way that they strengthen each other," he explained. "And I want to bring that philosophy to our company. Employees who feel valued as people, not just as producers of benefits, are more loyal, more creative, and in the long term, more profitable." To everyone's surprise, Blake's proposal wasn't to defend himself, but to transform the crisis into an opportunity for corporate renewal. He presented a concrete plan to implement more flexible family policies, wellness programs for employees, and genuine social responsibility initiatives, not merely cosmetic ones. "The business world is changing," he concluded. "Consumers and young talents seek companies with authentic values, not just impressive balance sheets. We can lead that change or stay behind, clinging to a model that will soon be obsolete." When they finally took the vote, Foster found himself isolated. The board backed Blake with an overwhelming majority, not only maintaining him as CEO, but preliminarily approving several of his corporate reform proposals. The attempted coup had failed, unexpectedly transforming into a renewed mandate. Upon leaving the boardroom, Blake found David, who had nervously waited for the result. "I can't believe you turned a board that was after your head into one that applauded your ideas," commented his friend, visibly impressed. "When did you plan all this?" "Last night," responded Blake with a tired but satisfied smile. "Olivia and I were talking about what truly matters, about the kind of legacy I want to leave, and I realized that I didn't just want to save my position. I wanted to transform it into something truly worth defending." David looked at him with renewed respect. "You know, you were always brilliant in business, Blake, but I think I'd never seen you so complete, as if finally all the pieces of who you are were aligned." Blake nodded, feeling the profound truth in his friend's words. For years he had compartmentalized his life. Blake the businessman, Blake the father, Blake the strategic partner. But now, for the first time, he felt integrated, a single man making coherent decisions in all spheres of his life. Upon leaving the corporate building, he didn't head to his office as he would have habitually done after a board meeting. Instead, he gave instructions to his driver to take him home, to Sunset Ridge, where he knew Olivia and the children awaited news. He found them in the garden, working in the vegetable patch they had considerably expanded in recent months. Ethan was the first to see him, running toward him with earth-stained hands and a smile that illuminated his entire face. "Dad, you beat the bad men!" Blake lifted him in his arms, not caring that his Italian suit was getting stained with dirt. "How do you know that, champ?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Because you came back early and you're smiling," responded Ethan with the simple but accurate logic of children. "Olivia said good men always win in the end, like in stories." Tyler and Madison also approached, less effusive but equally anxious for news, and behind them Olivia, with her gardening apron and hair carelessly tied back, more beautiful in his eyes than any woman in the most elegant outfit. "How did it go?" she asked, with that mixture of strength and tenderness that had captivated him from the beginning. "Better than expected," responded Blake, surrounding his older children's shoulders with his free arm. "I told them about us, about the changes in my life, and I proposed changes for the company too, and they accepted. Everything." Olivia's smile was like the sun emerging after a storm. "Really?" she asked, incredulous. "No conditions? No compromises?" "Well, one condition," corrected Blake with a suddenly serious expression. "They invited all of us to the company anniversary gala. All of us, as a family." An expectant silence followed his words. The implication was clear, a public acknowledgement of their relationship, of the new family configuration they had formed. "Did you accept?" Olivia finally asked, with a slight tremor in her voice. "I told them I would consult with my family," responded Blake, looking directly into her eyes, "that we make important decisions together now." Olivia's response was interrupted by Madison, who intervened with the impatience characteristic of her age. "Of course we'll go. Olivia will need a new dress, and so will I. Can we go shopping together?" "I want a bow tie like Dad's," added Ethan, still in his father's arms. Tyler, always the most reflective, observed the scene with a small smile. "It will be interesting to see the partners' faces when they see how happy you are now, Dad," he commented, with a perspicacity that surprised Blake. "Maybe they'll understand there are more ways to be successful than the one they know." Amid the childish enthusiasm, Blake sought Olivia's gaze, silently communicating that the final decision was hers, that he would respect any limit she wanted to establish, that there would be no more situations where appearances dictated his actions. Olivia's response was to approach him and, in front of the children, place a soft kiss on his lips. "We'll go as what we are," she declared firmly, "a real family, imperfect under construction but authentic, without masks or pretensions." The truly brave choice, thought Blake as he embraced his new family under the afternoon sun, is not between success and love, but choosing to define success in a way that includes love as its essential component. The garden of Sunset Ridge had been completely transformed. Paper lanterns in colors hung from the centennial trees, creating a magical atmosphere under the early summer twilight. Round tables covered with simple but elegant white tablecloths were strategically distributed, adorned with centerpieces of wildflowers collected by the children with Olivia's help. It wasn't the ostentatious celebration that Catherine would have organized, with gourmet catering and professional decorators. Instead, neighbors from Olivia's hometown had prepared traditional dishes, abundant and authentic. The music came from a small folk group, friends of Olivia's family, who played melodies that invited both nostalgia and celebration. In a corner of the garden, discreetly apart, Blake adjusted his tie in front of a small mirror that Tyler held for him. Unlike other important occasions, he didn't wear a formal designer Italian suit, but a simple navy blue suit that Olivia had helped select, complemented with a tie that Ethan had chosen for its happy color. "Are you nervous, Dad?" asked Tyler, studying his father's face with curiosity. "A little," admitted Blake with an honesty that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "But it's a good kind of nervous, like when you presented your science project." Tyler smiled, establishing the connection. "Nerves that come with important things," he nodded wisely. "Olivia is also nervous. I saw her change earrings 3 times. Blake laughed softly, imagining Olivia in her preparations, so different from Catherine's calculated perfection, who would never have shown indecision about any detail of her appearance. "Do you think she'll like the surprise?" he asked, discreetly pointing to the small box he kept in the inner pocket of his jacket. "She'll love it," responded Tyler with absolute conviction. "And if not, Madison owes me $5. She says Olivia will cry." Blake hugged his middle son, amazed by the transformation they had all experienced. The shy and introverted boy of a year ago now expressed his thoughts with confidence, shared jokes with his siblings, and had developed a relationship of complicity with his father that was based on real conversations, not on achievements or expectations. "Go find your siblings," indicated Blake, glancing at his watch. "Guests are arriving." Among the attendees was an unusual mix: executives from Anderson Enterprises with their families, neighbors from Olivia's town, teachers from the children's school, and even Catherine, who had come alone and maintained a discreet but cordial attitude, a testimony to the peace agreement they had reached for the good of the children. David approached Blake, impeccably dressed but visibly relaxed, with a glass of wine in hand. "I never imagined I would see the great Blake Anderson organizing a party in his garden with folk music and homemade empanadas," he commented with a genuine smile. "But I must admit, I'd never seen you so in your element." "I wouldn't have imagined it either," acknowledged Blake. "It turns out there was a whole life waiting for me, right where I least expected to find it." The conversation was interrupted when Madison appeared, radiant in a simple blue dress, to announce that everything was ready. Blake breathed deeply, feeling a mixture of emotion and certainty that contrasted with the protocol nerves of the great corporate presentations. Olivia appeared on the back porch, guided by Ethan, who held her hand like a little gentleman. She wore a coral-colored dress that enhanced the natural bronze of her skin, her loose hair adorned with small wildflowers that Madison had carefully interwoven. But what made her truly beautiful, thought Blake, was the authenticity she radiated, the absolute absence of pretension in each of her gestures. The guests naturally formed a semicircle, creating an intimate space as Blake walked toward Olivia, taking her hands in his. "A year ago," he began with a firm voice but charged with emotion, "my life seemed perfect from the outside but was empty inside. A house that wasn't a home, a family that lived under the same roof but didn't really share life, a man who had forgotten who he was under layers of expectations and appearances." Olivia looked at him with bright eyes, gently squeezing his hands in a sign of support. "And then you arrived," continued Blake, "not to change us, but to remind us who we could be, to teach us that life isn't measured in achievements or acquisitions, but in shared moments, in sincere laughter, in tears we're not afraid to shed together." He paused, briefly looking at his children, who observed with expressions ranging from Madison's contained emotion to Ethan's radiant smile. "You taught me that true love isn't perfect or immaculate. It's stubborn, sometimes messy, full of small daily gestures that build something unbreakable. You taught me to be a father, to be a man, to simply be myself without fear of others' judgment." With slightly trembling hands, Blake extracted the small box from his pocket. It didn't contain an ostentatious diamond ring as might be expected from a man of his position, but a simple silver ring with small inlays of semi-precious stones in blue and green tones. colors that Olivia always said reminded her of the valley where she had grown up. "Olivia Carter, I don't offer you a life of luxury or appearances," he declared, kneeling before the surprised and moved murmur of the guests. "I offer you a heart that has learned to truly love, a family that adores you, and the promise to build together a life worth living every day. Would you do me the honor of marrying me?" The tears that Olivia had contained until that moment finally overflowed, confirming Madison's prediction, who exchanged a triumphant look with Tyler. "Yes," responded Olivia with a broken but decided voice. "Yes, Blake Anderson. We'll build that life together day by day, moment by moment." As Blake slid the ring onto her finger, applause and cheers erupted around them. Ethan ran to hug them, followed by Tyler. Madison approached with more restraint, but with a smile that illuminated her usually serious face. "I knew you would say yes," commented the teenager, hugging Olivia. "Dad has been a disaster keeping the secret. He spends nights practicing his speech." Blake feigned indignation while everyone laughed. The engagement party transformed into a spontaneous and genuine celebration, with music, dance, and conversations that flowed without the rigid social norms that had characterized previous events at Sunset Ridge. At one point in the evening, Blake observed Catherine approaching Olivia. He instinctively tensed, prepared to intervene, but the interaction that followed left him genuinely surprised. Although he couldn't hear the words, he saw Catherine extend her hand toward Olivia in a formal but respectful gesture, and Olivia respond with equal dignity. It wasn't friendship, probably never would be, but it was a mutual recognition that promised a peaceful coexistence for the good of the children. Later, when the moon illuminated the garden and the guests began to leave, Blake found Olivia sitting on a bench under the centennial oak, watching the children who, despite the hour, continued playing with the neighbors' children. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting beside her and surrounding her shoulders with an arm. Olivia rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture of trust and belonging that Blake treasured. "About the unexpected paths of life," she responded after a moment. "About how what seems a simple work decision can change the entire course of your existence. When I accepted this job, I was only thinking about helping children who needed stability. I didn't imagine all of this." Blake kissed her forehead, inhaling the wildflower scent of her hair. "Do you regret it?" he asked, although he knew the answer. "Not for a second," she responded, turning to look at him directly. "But I do wonder what awaits us. It won't be easy, Blake. We come from very different worlds. There will be people who will never accept our relationship, who will always seek to judge it or belittle it." "Let them judge," he responded with serene conviction. "What we have is real, Olivia. More real than any social convention or external expectation. And as long as we remember that, as long as we keep this truth at the center of our life together, nothing can truly threaten us." At that moment, Madison approached with the old guitar she had rescued months ago. During the last year, she had practiced with dedication, rediscovering a passion that Catherine had always considered inappropriate for a young woman of her social position. "We have a surprise for you," she announced, with a mixture of shyness and determination. "The three of us, we've been practicing for weeks." Tyler and Ethan joined her, forming a small semicircle in front of their father and Olivia. Madison began to play, her fingers moving with growing confidence over the strings, while the three intoned a song that Olivia immediately recognized. It was a traditional melody from her town, a song of love and hope that her mother used to sing. Madison's clear voice led, with Tyler providing surprisingly tuneful harmonies, and Ethan adding enthusiasm more than precision. It wasn't a perfect performance, but the genuine emotion it transmitted made it infinitely more valuable than any technically impeccable execution. Blake looked at Olivia, whose tears now flowed freely, and felt his own heart expand with a love so intense it was almost painful. In that crystalline moment, he understood that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or corporate power, but in moments like this, authentic, imperfect, overflowing with love. The song came to an end, and the three siblings made a small bow before the emotional applause of the remaining guests. Olivia stood to hug them, her words of thanks choked by emotion. "It's the best gift anyone has ever given me," she finally managed to say. "How did you learn?" "Internet, mainly," responded Tyler pragmatically. "And Madison contacted your mother to make sure we had the correct lyrics." The surprise on Olivia's face revealed she had no idea of this secret contact with her family. "We wanted it to be perfect," added Ethan, with the absolute sincerity that characterized him. "Because now we're a real family, right?" "The most real family I know," confirmed Blake, joining the collective hug that had spontaneously formed. As he held the four beings who had transformed his life, Blake looked toward the house that had once been a cold and ostentatious mansion, and that now overflowed with life, laughter, and small disorders that evidenced the authentic existence that transpired between its walls. It was no longer Sunset Ridge just in name, but a true home where hope had blossomed in the form of love, acceptance, and second chances. Life, he reflected, doesn't really begin until we dare to be who we are, until we understand that endings are just doors to new beginnings, and that true love is not a destination, but a path we choose to walk together each day.